It all started with a hot dog. Not just any hot dog, though. This was the kind of hot dog you can only get from a cart on a sunny afternoon, the kind you crave when everything feels right. The sausage was grilled just enough to give it that satisfying snap, the bun soft and perfectly toasted. And of course, the ketchup. Oh, the ketchup. You see, I'm not the kind of person who just adds a little ketchup. I drown my hot dog in it. It's an art, a thick, glorious river of ketchup that flows over the sausage, soaking into the bun. If you're not doing it like that, you're doing it wrong. But on that fateful Tuesday, it wasn't the hot dog that changed everything. It wasn't even the ketchup. It was what happened after the ketchup. I was standing there, hot dog in hand, about to take the first bite, the perfect bite, when it happened. One tiny drop of ketchup, like it had a mind of its own, broke free from the bun. Slowly, deliberately. It flew through the air and landed directly in the center of my white shirt. I froze. For a moment, everything stopped. The world was moving in slow motion. That one drop of ketchup, as if mocking me, was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. My pristine shirt. Ruined. It was a sign, a stupid, tiny drop, but it changed everything. I stood there, holding my hot dog, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just ketchup. It was an insult, a reminder that no matter how much you prepare, life has a way of throwing random, messy things at you. And I had just been hit with ketchup. The worst part? I couldn't just wipe it off. It wasn't a small stain. It spread. It spread like a bad omen. And as I stared at my shirt, I knew my day was ruined. The meeting was in an hour, and I was about to walk into it with a ketchup stain on my chest. There was no way I could let this slide. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I decided to sue ketchup. Yes, you heard me right. I was going to sue a condiment, and thus began my mission to bring justice to the world of condiments, one drop of ketchup at a time. I've never been one for drama. At least, not the kind of drama most people think of. No, I was the type of person who planned everything meticulously. My life was a carefully constructed series of to-do lists, deadlines, and calculated risks. In the world of unpredictable chaos, I was the anchor of calm. But despite all my preparation, life seemed to have other plans. Let's rewind a bit. Before the Great Ketchup incident, I had what you might call a normal life. I worked as a project manager at a small but respectable firm. My days were filled with meetings, spreadsheets, and phone calls. The kind of job that doesn't scream adventure, but at least paid the bills. I'd grown up in a family where efficiency was the goal and spontaneity was a luxury. My parents were planners, the kind who set goals for everything, even how long to watch TV each week. They believed in controlling everything, your career, your schedule, even your future. I had learned that to survive in the world, you had to always be in control. You had to plan for every possible outcome, even the ones that seemed completely unlikely. And that's what I did. I was on the fast track to success. Or so I thought. Promotions were coming in, meetings went smoothly, and my career seemed to be sailing along just fine. But deep down, I knew something was missing. I wasn't exactly happy, but I wasn't unhappy either. I was simply existing. I needed something to shake things up. And then came the hot dog. That hot dog was supposed to be a simple pleasure, a moment of joy before diving back into the grind. I didn't expect anything to happen. I didn't expect that drop of ketchup to be anything more than a tiny inconvenience. But when it hit my shirt, I realized something. I wasn't in control. I'd spent years, decades even, trying to control every detail of my life, and now here I was, helpless against a condiment. I thought about how stupid this whole situation was. A ketchup stain ruining my day, my shirt, and possibly my entire career. But then I thought about how often we let little things slip by. How often we let tiny inconveniences go unchallenged, only to later realize they've piled up, creating a much bigger problem. That's when the idea came to me. Why should I let this slide? I wasn't going to let a drop of ketchup define my future. No, I would take control of this mess. I would make the world see that even the smallest, seemingly insignificant problems deserve attention. So I made my decision. I was going to sue Ketchup. The day I decided to sue Ketchup wasn't anything special. It started like any other. The morning sun streamed through my apartment window. The hum of the city's usual chaos was in the background, and I was running late. Like most mornings, I rushed to get dressed, grabbed a coffee, and shoved some papers into my bag. I had that important meeting later, the one that could change everything. I was ready. But the moment I stepped outside, I realized something was off. I was hungry. Not the "I'll wait till lunch" kind of hunger, the deep, gnawing kind. It wasn't just a craving, it was an urgent need for comfort, something familiar, something simple. And that's when I remembered it. The food cart on the corner. They made the best hot dogs in the city. A small indulgence, but it was the kind of thing that could take the edge off when you needed it most. So I made a quick detour, heading to the corner where the hot dog vendor always stood. The sizzling sound of the grill, the smell of freshly baked buns, and the bright yellow ketchup bottle. Everything about it was perfect. I ordered my usual, a hot dog with a ridiculous amount of ketchup. I knew it was a bit over the top, but who was going to judge me? The hot dog vendor didn't care. I didn't care. It was my comfort food, and I deserved it. I grabbed my food, and with my hot dog in hand, I felt like I could conquer the world, at least for the next 5 minutes. I was already thinking about my presentation, mentally running through my notes when it happened. The universe, in all its glory, decided to remind me that nothing in life was as predictable as I thought. As I brought the hot dog to my mouth, the ketchup betrayed me. One single drop of ketchup, the size of a pea, broke free from the bun and in slow motion flew through the air. There was no way I could stop it. Time seemed to freeze as I watched that tiny red speck hurtle towards me. It had all the time in the world to make its mark. And then it landed, right on the center of my white shirt. For a moment I was numb. My eyes were locked on the stain, and I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The universe had just delivered its judgment. A drop of ketchup, so small yet so powerful, had ruined my day. I stood there, hot dog in hand, frozen in time, as the ketchup spread across the fabric. What was I supposed to do? My shirt was ruined. It wasn't just a minor spill, it was a blotch that could never be erased. It wasn't just a stain, it was a symbol. As I stared at the mess, I began to feel a sense of outrage building up inside me. Why did this happen? Why was I, of all people, the victim of a rogue ketchup drop? I looked around, half expecting someone to point and laugh at me. But no one did. They just kept walking by, oblivious to the catastrophe unfolding before me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a stain. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. This was a moment, a defining moment. I couldn't let it go. I wasn't just going to walk away, defeated by a condiment. I was going to take action. I was going to make a statement. I was going to sue Ketchup. When I decided to sue Ketchup, I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean, who sues a condiment? It felt insane, but at the same time, it felt right. My shirt was ruined, my day was ruined, and I wasn't just going to let this drop of ketchup slide under the radar. The first thing I needed was a lawyer. So I did what any person in my position would do. I Googled lawyers who sue Ketchup. Unsurprisingly, nothing came up, so I broadened the search to lawyers who handle weird lawsuits. Again, the results weren't exactly promising, but eventually I stumbled upon the office of a lawyer who specialized in unconventional cases. Her name was Gloria Hamilton. I'd never met her, but her website said she had a reputation for handling cases that were outside the box. It was the kind of description you'd expect from a lawyer who had seen some things. Things like people suing their neighbors over lawn gnomes or suing amusement parks for emotional distress caused by roller coasters. I called her office, and after an awkward conversation with her assistant, I was scheduled for an appointment. Walking into her office, I felt a strange combination of nervousness and excitement. It was a small space with wood-paneled walls and a bookshelf crammed with legal books and dusty awards. Gloria was sitting behind her desk, a no-nonsense type with short, spiky hair and a glare that could melt steel. "So," she said without looking up, "what's the case?" I took a deep breath. "I want to sue Ketchup." Her eyes didn't even flinch. She didn't laugh or ask if I was joking. "Ketchup? Like the condiment?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, and suddenly it felt even more absurd than I had imagined. I felt like a fool, but I pushed forward. "Exactly. I was eating a hot dog and I spilled ketchup on my shirt. It ruined my whole day. And I want justice." She leaned back in her chair and looked me over. "So, you're telling me that you want to take the entire ketchup industry to court because you dropped a little condiment on your shirt?" I nodded again. Yes, it wasn't just a drop, though. It was the principle of it. The whole world's out of control, and no one takes responsibility for these little things that go wrong. But it's these little things that add up. If I let this go, what happens next? The mustard, the mayo? It's time someone took a stand. Gloria didn't answer right away. She stared at me, thinking before she spoke. "You know what? This is ridiculous, but it's also kind of brilliant," she said, a smile forming at the corners of her lips. "All right, let's do this." The day of the trial arrived, and to say I was nervous would be an understatement. My heart raced as I walked into the courtroom, a place where justice was supposed to be served, but in this case it felt like a circus. I was dressed in a crisp suit, the one that wasn't ruined by ketchup, and standing beside Gloria Hamilton, my attorney, who looked far more confident than I felt. Gloria had assured me that we had a solid case, but even she seemed a bit thrown off by the ridiculousness of it all. The courtroom was packed. People had come to watch, either out of curiosity or because they thought they might witness a train wreck. There were reporters from local news stations, people snapping photos with their phones, and even a few onlookers in the back who looked like they'd been dragged in by accident. The judge, a middle-aged man with a permanent frown, looked down at us from the bench. His gavel slammed with authority as he called the court to order. "Case of Smith versus Ketchup Incorporated," he announced, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Mr. Smith, you are suing the ketchup industry for what exactly?" I stood up, trying to appear more confident than I felt. "Your Honor, I am suing the ketchup industry for emotional distress, damages to personal property, and a general failure to provide adequate protection from condiment-related accidents." There was a pause in the courtroom, followed by a burst of laughter. The judge raised an eyebrow, but motioned for me to continue. "Please explain how a condiment caused you distress," the judge said dryly. I cleared my throat and began recounting the tragic events. I told him how, on that fateful Tuesday, I had been eating a hot dog, a simple, innocent act, when a drop of ketchup had ruined my entire day. I described the mess on my shirt, my feelings of helplessness, and how it had spiraled into a deeper existential crisis about the lack of control in my life. Gloria, sitting next to me, whispered, "Tell him about the mustard and mayo." Right," I added quickly. "And if I let this ketchup stain slide, it sets a dangerous precedent. What's next? Mustard? Mayo? If we don't hold ketchup accountable, we open the floodgates to all kinds of reckless condiment behavior." The judge looked down at his notes, clearly trying not to burst out laughing. "I see. So this is about stopping future condiment-related chaos?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, now fully invested in my own rhetoric. "If we don't act now, the entire condiment industry will go unchecked. People will start spilling mustard, mayo, and even relish without consequences. This is about fairness, responsibility, and preventing anarchy." Gloria gave me a thumbs up under the table, clearly impressed by my sudden eloquence. But the defense attorney, a sharp-suited man from Ketchup, Inc., stood up. He was tall, with slicked back hair and a confident stride. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, "this is a case about nothing more than an unfortunate incident. Mr. Smith was careless with his food. The ketchup did not act with malice. It was simply a drop, a tiny drop, which by no means justifies this lawsuit. We ask the court to dismiss the charges immediately." The room buzzed with murmurs. The defense lawyer's statement was smooth, but I wasn't going to back down now. I had come too far to let them dismiss this as a simple mistake. The judge turned to Gloria. "Do you have anything to add?" Gloria stood adjusting her glasses. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe this case is about more than just a spilled condiment. This is about setting a precedent, a stand against the unchecked actions of condiments in our daily lives. If we allow this case to be dismissed, we risk losing control over our food and, by extension, our future." There was a heavy silence as the judge looked between the two sides. He sighed deeply. "This is a first." The courtroom was buzzing with anticipation. You could feel the tension in the air as everyone waited for the judge to make his decision. The defense had made their case, and I had delivered what could only be described as an impassioned speech about the future of condiments and the importance of holding them accountable. Both sides had given their best arguments, but now it was up to the judge. I sat on the edge of my seat, heart pounding, staring at the judge as he scanned through his notes. The silence was deafening. Finally, the judge looked up. "I have considered the arguments presented," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. "Mr. Smith, you have made a very interesting case. You argue that this single drop of ketchup caused you emotional distress, and that, by allowing such an accident to happen, the greater condiment industry is at risk of descending into chaos. I must admit, I have never heard such an argument in my years on the bench." I felt a surge of pride. He was acknowledging the brilliance of my case. Maybe I could actually win this. "However," the judge continued, his face hardening, "I also recognize the absurdity of this entire situation. Ketchup is, after all, just a condiment, a small, harmless condiment that serves the simple purpose of enhancing a hot dog. No one should be held liable for a tiny drop of ketchup. You, Mr. Smith, were simply careless." My heart sank. This wasn't happening. "But," the judge said, leaning forward, "there is something to be said about the principle you're fighting for. You make an argument for accountability, for fairness, and for not letting the little things go unchecked. And I find that admirable in its own strange way." I was on the edge of my seat. Had he just acknowledged that I was right? Was this going to be a win? "So," the judge said with a sigh, "I'm going to rule in your favor, but not in the way you might expect." There was a collective gasp in the courtroom. People were on the edge of their seats, waiting for the final judgment. "I am dismissing the lawsuit against Ketchup, Inc., the judge declared, "but I am awarding you $1 in damages for your emotional distress." I blinked. $1? The judge banged his gavel. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Smith, but in a manner most fitting of the absurdity of this case. Case dismissed." The courtroom erupted in chaos. There was a mix of laughter, shock, and applause. The defense team looked bewildered, and Gloria stood beside me, her face a mixture of disbelief and amusement. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. Technically, I had won. I was the first person to ever sue a condiment and get awarded damages. Sure, it was $1, but it wasn't about the money. It was about making a statement. I had stood up for what I believed in, even if it was for something as trivial as ketchup. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the reporters rushed toward me. "Mr. Smith," "How do you feel about your victory?" one asked, shoving a microphone in my face. I smiled. "I feel like I just changed the world." Walking out of the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just participated in the most bizarre event of my life. I'd been awarded $1, one single, lonely dollar. It wasn't much, but it was the principle of the thing. I had taken on the ketchup industry and won. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as I navigated through the crowd of reporters who were eager to get a word from the man who had just made history. Or so they thought. The first question came from a reporter with a gleaming camera. "Mr. Smith, do you believe this verdict will change how food companies approach liability?" I chuckled nervously. "Well, I'm not sure about the entire food industry, but I think condiments should be a bit more careful. Who knows? Maybe next time we'll get a disclaimer on the ketchup bottle. Warning, may cause emotional distress if spilled." The reporters laughed, but the feeling of absurdity was starting to sink in. Was this what I really wanted? I had fought tooth and nail for this small victory, but now that it was over, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. A few days later, the media storm surrounding my case began to die down. My face had appeared on TV, the internet was flooded with memes about the ketchup lawsuit guy, and I was getting strange messages from people who seemed to think I was some sort of hero. People were congratulating me, calling me brave for standing up to the condiment industry. Others, though, questioned my sanity, telling me I'd just wasted everyone's time. The verdict was, undoubtedly, the most bizarre moment of my life, but I wasn't sure if it had actually changed anything. Did anyone truly care about ketchup? Or was I just an internet joke? The dollar I had been awarded sat in a frame on my desk, a constant reminder of the surreal nature of it all. The more I looked at it, the more I realized that the real victory wasn't in the lawsuit. It was in what I had learned. I had spent so much time trying to control every little detail of my life, only to find myself fighting against something as trivial as a drop of ketchup. But in that moment, I had let go of the idea of being perfect, of controlling everything. I had learned that sometimes the smallest things, like a condiment on your shirt, could have a huge impact on your perspective. Months later, I found myself laughing at the absurdity of it all. People still joked about my ketchup lawsuit. It had become an iconic moment in internet culture. But I started to wonder if there was a deeper message hidden in the ridiculousness. Maybe life wasn't about winning or losing. Maybe it was about embracing the chaos and finding meaning in even the smallest things. As for the ketchup industry, they never commented on the case. Maybe they were too embarrassed. Maybe they figured that $1 wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, I had made my point. I had stood up, and in doing so, I had found something more important than any court ruling, a sense of freedom. In the end, the case had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It had reminded me that sometimes the world is absurd, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to laugh at the chaos, and sometimes you have to accept that things will never make sense. But that's what makes life interesting. It's funny how life works out. When I first decided to sue ketchup, I never imagined it would lead me here, sitting in a quiet coffee shop, looking back at the absurdity of it all with a smirk on my face. I had become a minor internet celebrity, my name synonymous with the ridiculous lawsuit against a condiment. People still occasionally stop me on the street to ask if I'm the ketchup guy, and while I never expected to become a meme, I've learned to embrace it. The $1 I was awarded in court still sits in a frame on my bookshelf. Sometimes when I look at it, I can't help but laugh. It's a reminder of the time I took on an industry that didn't even know I existed and came out with a win. Albeit a very strange one, but what's even more amusing is the way that single dollar has turned into something more than just money. It's become a symbol of the bizarre path my life took, and a reminder that sometimes the most ridiculous things can lead to the most unexpected lessons. In the months following the trial, my life returned to some semblance of normalcy, but with a few changes. For one, I found that I had developed a new sense of perspective. I didn't need to control every little thing. I didn't need everything to be perfect. I had learned that sometimes you just have to let go and laugh at the chaos. And that, in itself, was a kind of victory. I still eat hot dogs, but now I'm a little more careful with my ketchup. Not because I'm afraid of another lawsuit, but because I've come to appreciate the unpredictability of life. One drop of ketchup might seem insignificant, but sometimes it's those tiny moments that have the power to shape everything. People often ask me if I regret suing Ketchup. My answer is always the same: no. Sure, it was bizarre, and yes, it might have been a waste of time for some, but it taught me something important about standing up for what I believe in, no matter how absurd it might seem. And more than anything, it reminded me that life isn't always about making sense of everything. Sometimes it's about finding meaning in the nonsense. As for the ketchup industry, they still haven't made any moves toward regulation, and I doubt they will, but I'm okay with that. In the end, the lawsuit wasn't really about the ketchup. It was about the journey. The journey that led me to this moment of reflection, to this sense of peace I never thought I would find. Maybe the real lesson is that the small things, the weird, random moments that seem trivial at the time, can sometimes have the biggest impact on our lives. And sometimes, when we're least expecting it, a drop of ketchup can change everything. And for that, I'm grateful.